Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. We've got a lot to cover in this midweek edition, including our By the Numbers segment. So let's cut to the chase, or as they're called today, the playoffs. Sunday is the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season finale at Phoenix. That night, we'll have our new champion crowned. Joey Logano and Tyler Reddick were locked in before Sunday's race at Martinsville. Ryan Blaney and William Byron clinched their bids at the Paperclip. Yesterday was Championship 4 Media Day, and I listened to all 4 driver interviews on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. Here are some highlights from their remarks, starting with Joey Logano and fans questioning the legitimacy of his appearance following his elimination and reincarnation after the disqualification of Alex Bowman at the Charlotte Roval.
There are still folks out there that say because of the 48 disqualification and you guys getting a second life, you don't belong in the Championship 4. What do you say to that?
So they belonged in the Championship 4 or the round of 8 because they were light? That's they should be in is what you're saying? You should cheat and be able to move in? I'm just saying that, if we're all supposed to be playing on an equal playing field,
Sure.
Right, and they pushed it too far, and you're gonna get dinged for it, right? We all push it far, right? And however it happened, I don't know, but they went too far, right? And NASCAR had to put the foot down. So, and we were next in line. Does that make us lucky? No, we were next in line for a reason, and we had to race against a car that wasn't legal. So we had to spot the whole time, in my opinion, right? And like I said, everyone's going to have their own opinion. I've listened to this channel a lot. Everyone's got their own opinion.
Welcome
and
to
I
our
love
world.
that. I love that. But it's, to me, that's how I see it, is that, nobody makes it to the Championship 4 not in a deserving way. Right? Everyone, you have to get here somehow. Everyone has the same opportunity. When we roll into February in Daytona, everybody has the same opportunity to get to the Championship 4. Doesn't matter how you get there, but we all have the same opportunity to get there.
Sure.
And so, we came in as maybe not the number 1 seed, or maybe not even the number 10 seed, but we figured out how to get through the rounds, and now we're here. So, everyone had the same opportunity to do that.
Logano will be joined by his Penske teammate Ryan Blaney, who won on Sunday. If there's a favorite, it has to be the reigning champion Blaney, because he's followed the same path as a year ago, finishing second at Homestead, winning in walk-off fashion at Martinsville before winning the title at Phoenix. During his interview with Dave Moody and Alex Weaver, the Penske driver talked about his win in Virginia and brought up an interesting subject that everyone was talking about before the race, but no one was talking about it after because it got lost in all the playoff controversy, and that was tires. Goodyear brought a new, softer compound.
Well, it was a great race. I really thought the whole Martinsville race was really fantastic. I thought Goodyear brought a great tire, work in the direction of where we need to go with that.
While the high tire wear was good for competition, it produced debris on the track. A large ball of rubber made its way under the hood of Tyler Reddick's number 45 car and caught on fire. Here's the 2311 racing driver's comments on how a scary situation got even scarier when he headed down pit road.
But yeah, I guess I was relieved the fire wasn't any bigger. I was relieved I didn't run anybody over.
That's nice.
When I hit pit road, that was the last of the breaks that I had, and unfortunately my pit crew jumped over the wall, and I thought I was going to take out my entire pit crew.
Wow.
Thankfully dodged them. Then I decided to pull it into the garage, and that was a great idea until I got behind the wall, and I remembered I didn't have a clutch, I didn't have brakes, and there's just people everywhere, and I'm like, I can't stop. If someone trips, I'm going to run them over.
And finally, last up for the interviews was the last one to make it into the Championship 4, William Byron. The Hendrick Motorsports driver talked about this week's preparation and how it includes using all assets within the 4-car organization. We're talking everyone. Listen to this.
It does, because I look at the Penske guys and thinking about what they're going through, and they're all talking about teamwork and everything like that. And for me, it's everyone at Hendrick Motorsports is thinking about my car. So it's seeing that yesterday and seeing everyone working on the 24 car, even Cliff coming in the room. How can I help? Set up things. So it's just it's all hands on deck at our shop, and that's different, I feel like, than anywhere else.
Interesting, to say the least. Now, let's move on to our next story, but we're going to return to playoff driver Tyler Reddick. On Monday, after my recap video, There was a preliminary injunction hearing in North Carolina for the antitrust lawsuit filed by 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports against NASCAR and chairman Jim France. During that hearing, 2311 Racing attorneys argued they needed an injunction for two reasons, and one of them was big news. The first reason is in order to compete even as an open team, the agreement language releases NASCAR of any antitrust claims, which obviously would not work with the current situation and lawsuit. The other reason for the injunction is the possibility that Reddick and sponsors can leave 2311 Racing if the team has to race as an open or unchartered team while pursuing the lawsuit. Yeah, you heard that right. Reddick could leave the number 45 car in 2025. Will he actually leave? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. What I do know is we'll have a much better idea if that's an actual possibility when the judge makes a ruling, which is expected to be by Friday. Moving out of the federal courts and into NASCAR court. On Tuesday, the sanctioning body handed out 3 behavioral penalties to the teams of Austin Dillon, Ross Chastain, and Bubba Wallace for shenanigans at the end of Sunday's Martinsville race. Each penalty included the suspension of a team executive, crew chief, and spotter. Additionally, the team and driver were fined $100,000 and assessed with a loss of 50 points. So all in all, we had 9 total suspensions, $600,000 in fines, and the docking of 150 points. And NASCAR still got it wrong and effectively did nothing to prevent it from happening again. The manufacturers were the reason this all happened, but weren't penalized at all. NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition, Elton Sawyer, explained why the OEMs weren't on the receiving end of any sanctions.
We did discuss adding our OEMs to that list. At this point in time, there's not language in the rule book that would allow us to penalize our OEMs. We plan to address that in the off season.
How many times have we heard it's not in the rule book and we'll look at it later? I'll be sure and let you know how that all works out. And I have one final story before we get to our By the Numbers segment, and it's actually a driver reaction to a post of mine on X. As you saw in Monday's video, I talked about Chase Elliott being unhappy in that third stage with a move made by Chris Buescher. Well, I posted that same audio and video on X and tagged both Elliott and Buescher. Take a look at the RFK Racing driver's response. That's exactly what Steve Letarte said on the broadcast about the number 17 car. He was making a pit stop. Funny stuff. And finally, it's time to move on to our By the Numbers segment. And we're going to stick with Elliott and talk about a couple of numbers and why I think it's good news for fans of the number 9 in 2025. Anyone paying attention to the 28-year-old driver this year knows there's one word that sums up his season: consistency. The 2020 champ has undeniably been the most consistent driver throughout the 2024 campaign, and that's reflected in his top average finishing position for the year, which is 11.8. Incredibly, the next closest to him is Christopher Bell at 13 even. Think about that, more than an entire spot behind him. To give further context, Bell is followed by Larson and Byron, who are both at 13.2, and Tyler Reddick rounds out the top 5 for average finishing position this season at 13.4. While Elliott's average finishing position is impressive, it hasn't translated into multiple wins. But could there be more in 2025? One of the stats that shows whether a car is a race-winning car is the number of laps led. Looking back at this category for Elliott over the last few seasons, and it's interesting. Going back to his championship in 2020, he led 1,247 out of 9,541, or 13% of the laps. The next 2 seasons, number 9 team dropped off, but still led around 10% of the total laps for each season. We won't even bother with last year's number because of his injury and missing 7 races. So that brings us to this year. Through the first 33 races in 2024, Elliott led 214 laps. Not that impressive, I know. But take a look at how many laps he's led in the last 2 races. 210 laps. That's right. At Homestead, he led 81, and on Sunday at the Paperclip, he led 129. And these weren't strategy calls that put the number 9 up front. He was there on pace after qualifying 7th and 2nd, respectively. Giving you just a little more context, Elliott's highest number of laps led before Homestead was at the spring race in Martinsville, where he led 64 laps. I think more tellingly, the last time Elliott led 80 laps or more in consecutive races was the final 2 races in 2021 at Martinsville and Phoenix. I know I heard him say on Sunday about how proud he was of his team's effort in recent weeks, and the results showed it. I think that laps led statistic is a good indicator of how well the number 9 team has performed lately, and if they can finish off the season at Phoenix doing something similar, you'd have to think that would be some good momentum heading into next year. While Elliott appears to be trending in the right direction, Joe Gibbs Racing is in the middle of a stretch of racing the 4-car organization would just as soon forget. I addressed it a couple of weeks ago when the streak hit 15. What streak am I talking about? Well, JGR is now up to 17 races since it last won a race. That was Christopher Bell hoisting Loudon the Lobster back in June at New Hampshire. In that time, here are the teams that have won. Penske leads the way with 5 and is followed by HMS at 4, 2311 at 2, and the following all have 1. JTG Doherty, Wood Brothers, Richard Childress Racing, Stewart Haas Racing, RFK Racing, and Trackhouse. So think about that. Gibbs has been outperformed in the win column over the last half of the season by one organization that is going away in 2025 in SHR and whose driver will be joining the team next year, and another driver who won't even be in the Cup Series next year in Harrison Burton. So how does this streak measure up historically for the organization? The last time JGR endured a winless drought this long was at the start of the 2017 campaign. Hamlin won the 19th race of the year at, ironically enough, New Hampshire, the scene of the team's last win this year. If a Gibbs car doesn't win on Sunday in Phoenix, that streak will extend to 18, and the 3 current drivers and their teams will get to think about it all off season. And finally, it's time for our last item of the day, and it's a review of our last 5 races. I have to say, as the season comes to a close, I've really enjoyed highlighting this data for most of the year because I think this specific statistic is the one that matches the saying, "What have you done for me lately?" My buddy Joel Steuben has been providing the fantastic, accommodating graphics all year, including ones where we've gone into deeper analysis like the playoff drivers and the first 100 races in the next-gen car. I'm really thankful for his work and hope to have him back providing the same awesome visuals in 2025. Looking back at the last 5 races, and a couple of things immediately stick out to me. First, there's only one Championship 4 driver inside the top 5, and that's the man at the top of the list, William Byron, who's been on a heater lately with 5 finishes inside the top 6, including back-to-back 6th-place finishes at Homestead and Miami. His HMS teammate Kyle Larson comes in second with a solid AFP of 6.4, and is followed by Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, and Bubba Wallace. Joey Logano comes in 9th at 16 even, and his Penske teammate Ryan Blaney slots in 2 spots behind with an AFP of 16.8. Incredibly, Tyler Reddick, who held the top spot on this list for weeks earlier this year, hasn't been so hot lately, with an average finishing position of 20.2. And we'll wrap up the review of our last 5 races by taking a look at who rounds out the very bottom of the list, and that's Ty Gibbs. Look at those numbers. In the last 4 races, the number 54 driver's best finish is 30th. Ouch. We know who won't be snapping the JGR winless streak at Phoenix. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. I want to hear what you thought about it. First, in those Championship 4 driver interviews, anything stick out to you? I'm curious what you guys think about Joey Logano's remarks, as he said everyone had the same rules coming in at the start of the season. And what do you think about the latest hearing on the 2311 Racing lawsuit and learning that Tyler Reddick and sponsors could walk away in 2025 if the team is an open car? Pretty wild to even think about. And of course, I want to hear what you guys think about NASCAR's penalties handed down yesterday. Did they get it right? And do you see this happening again in the future? And finally, what about the By the Numbers segment? Do you think Chase Elliott will build off his momentum at the end of 2024 and carry it over into 2025? And for you JGR fans, when does the winless streak come to an end? This weekend at Phoenix? Maybe Daytona? Thank you guys, as always, for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I really, really appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day.